introduce yourself, your name, your career, and the institution or the country you're coming from. Any questions, please?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Ibrahim Mohammed Abdullah Al-Faki. I come from United Arab Emirates University, where I teach there. In fact, I've got one question for each of the member of the panel. I would like to start with Elmouiz regarding the conclusions that you presented regarding deterioration of the education system in Sudan. Is it just general feeling, or yes, you have some approach that brought you to this conclusion, i.e., because you mentioned here KPIs and what is the empirical research that led into this conclusion? This is a question to Dr. Elmouiz. Although you feel that it is deteriorating, but what are the evidence, in fact, apart from what we see, in fact? And the second question goes to Dr. Nahlaa Khalifa. In fact, a very interesting presentation. And we'd like to ask about the applicability of MM. Is it applicable across disciplines? Because here just medically mentions the medical field. And if so, you mentioned, if I'm right, it's 6 years since being invented, this approach. Is it, am I correct? 16? 60. Okay, so if it is 60, then how spread is it now? Okay, how spread? And are people adopting it? If it's not spread, then what are the reasons for this? And another question, in fact, related to this interesting approach is what resources are needed, in fact, in terms of what resources are needed, in fact, to implement this methodology, and does it cost some financial resources, and what it takes in terms of teacher preparation and students' ground and kind of things that are essential, in fact. And the last question, sorry, I'm just taking some time. The last question goes to Atif regarding this accessibility of website to impaired individuals. And you have presented some kind of empirical results based on Sudanese students from universities in Sudan. Do they represent the population of impaired? Because it seems that is the study is a general, kind of general study, and the feedback and the rate of retention so cover almost everybody in the world. So you took a sample from Sudan. Does this sample, in fact, reflect the whole population of impaired individuals? And, or is it kind of customized to Sudanese students? Is it customized or just general application? Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so we have a question for each presenter. We'll start with Mr. Elmouiz.
Thanks very much. I guess the question about the KPI, how we measure the KPI. Okay, is first of all, as we mentioned, the paper is we use a qualitative approach, and although now we're working to develop it in with the statistics, I'm going to build a simulation later on to visualize and get a statistical result out. But the important thing is the KPI is driven by the target, what you want to achieve. And once you shift the direction, so by definition, you shifted the purpose and the aim, and straight away you have deficiency in the KPI. So by definition, when you change the purpose of the system from serving the country to serve an ideology, then straight away, but you're right, we're going to build a simulation for the purpose of better demonstration. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. If mind mapping is applicable, I go with the second part, okay? It is not hard, it is easy to apply mind mapping. It needs think with a licensed instructor, okay? And we can make training for many of the teaching staff in the university, and there are many online mind mapping. Okay, so it is very easy. Around the world, it is well known, okay, but in Sudan, as I mentioned, it is not applied, but it's used in universities, and in my research, I found that in many medical institutions, they used. For me, personally, I used at King Abdulaziz University for some medical subjects. I found a big difference in the marks among the students, especially for the difficult topics or difficult subjects like anatomy, pathology, something like this. So I think we can, together, we can apply mind mapping. As I mentioned, it is found websites. We can find many websites. Also, it can teach you how to do it, unless you can find some to teach us how to do it. Okay.
Thanks so much for the question. In general, accessibility is an international problem, to be honest. According to the UNESCO, last conference was in India, December 2014. As it is internationally, the blind and visually impaired people are facing these problems. But I did test in Sudan. We have in 3 universities. We have 26 universities, but I select only 3 universities, which is Sudan, Khartoum, and Nahlaa. Around 220 blind people, 200 blind. But the most of them, they using they have high quality recorder to record the lecture, but 10% they're using the software. So that, I mean, we just test the 10% and we ask them about their view. And also it is expensive for them as individuals to have this software. But I'm just going to follow it in order to, I'm going to Sudan in December to we can make a center for all universities in order to use. And I've got free softwares as a software they can be able to use it, the most of them. But is a license, is like just testing website testing software. But it's going to be expensive for individual if they implement it. But I think for university it must be because they're having e-learning, but it's not accessible for them. So it is out. So they're not using even the website, the university website, according to the question they answer on the interview. So I interview them by telephone and we test them. We ask them to test software, so they test it. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, please. Can you introduce you?
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Elham Yusuf. I'm interested in the social and political development. My question will focus on a very interesting part of the first presentation about the critical evaluations of education. I'm particularly interested in the critical part of it. So my question to Marwan is how critical this evaluation is, because I can see the education system in Sudan, what I understood from what you said, is being built to suit the purpose of the colonial system, and then to serve Jafar Numeiri's Arab nationalism and to serve the Islamic ideology in 1989. So from the start, the education system is never owned by the Sudanese society. So what's the social value here? My point is, the question is how critical your evaluation, it was too far from being critical. So I want you to explain that precisely, to how critically you engage with the education system in Sudan. Okay, the question is how critical this evaluation is when you kind of try to avoid the fact that the education system in Sudan is never owned by the society. How that? And the other question for Dr. Khalifa, I'm really impressed by the presentation to start with, and the fact that the presentations with the mind mapping enhances the ability of the students to see and evaluate and engage more critically with what they taught. I studied all my education in Sudan, and I remember the hierarchy of education and the high up educators and teachers who telling you what to do, telling you to go and memorize what they taught you, and you just have one way answer. It's like one model answer. It's like it's got to be X, so you will get the full mark, or it's got to be S and you will lose it. So I'm really interested to see if there is any plans to introduce mind mapping modules in the education system, not just in the universities, even in the other part of the education system. I would be very interested. And the last question for Atif is really ambitious, because even able people in Sudan is struggling with the web accessibility. It's really ambitious, and I do appreciate that. And you kind of answered my question by saying that you're going back to Sudan in December, trying to introduce this. So I wish you all the best for that. Thank you.
Yes, you're right. It was an inherited system from the... Okay. So it was inherited system, but you would be amazed to know that when the first generation took responsibility of the system, they have built lots of vocational education, lots of them. It was built after 1956. It was, they planned it and they built it. So they own it, they took responsibility. It was called Wizart al-Ma'arif, Knowledge Ministry. So it's managed by them, not just inherited and run as it is. No. Yeah, is that answer the question or Sheda? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you for the question. Actually, when I had been invited by Dr. Aljaaly for this conference, I'm very happy to share, of course, my research, but actually I'm most happy because this is, I think, the best place that we can make recommendations and apply our recommendations, okay, for Sudan. So definitely, I think about to apply in Sudan, and mind mapping, by the way, it is get more benefits among the children also. But because we started in King Abdulaziz University, so we look forward to apply in Sudan, and I think Prof. Elham here and all of us, I think for all the papers we have to look deep in our recommendations and try to apply it in our beloved country, Sudan.
Thanks for the question. I did a literature review, wide literature review from international papers and journals, enabled me to understand what is accessibility and to go through what's the problem in accessibility. And also, my background, I did work in RNIB, which is Royal National Institute for Blindness, as a voluntary for 2 years. And also, I work in Birmingham, focus on blindness for 6 months. To collect data from clients, I did work with them and interact with them, and I asked them and help them as well. Even they used me as a technology visitor to set them as the software. For Sudan, it's going to be a mission phase. But what we try to do in Sudan, we try to make as a central library for all university, especially for those visually impaired or blind peoples, in order to use the websites, especially for their studies. So if you can't see the website, if you can't view or interact with the website, then you are out. So that means you are excluded from viewing a website, especially university website. So if they have e-learning or they have models, they have to download it or look at it from the internet. So that is a little bit difficult. But we try to implement it in a place there in Sudan, so as here that there is some center where the software on the computer, then the blind visual impaired can come and sit and use the computer in general through this center. So I hope that I get help from government in order to implement it there, but it's down to educational people and Ministry of Education and so on. Thank you.
The topic is really interesting, but I add my voice to my predecessors about the need to look deeply into critically evaluating the education system in Sudan. And in my opinion, this paper could be seen as a primer, but it needs a follow-up in terms of data. I mean, it's our feeling in general, which was reflected in the paper, but we need to talk evidence here. And there are some dilemmas or some contradictions that needs to be explained. For example, in the medical field, and just from anecdotal evidence, we see in Sudan that the coverage of medical education has expanded a lot during the past decade. And that led to thinning of capacity in different medical schools. But paradoxically, we see graduates from those schools, and in particular from states in Sudan, succeeding in international exams. Wherever you go in the United States, here in this country, and others. So there is something that needs to be explained here, because this is unexpected in terms of where you see a very poor medical school in terms of infrastructure and these things, and yet you see its graduates excelling, I mean at the international arena. So I would personally be very much interested to see a follow-up for this study. The second question for the mind mapping presentation is really interesting, and I wonder if there is a specific software that could be, shared in this regards. The second point, I guess Nahlaa knows that the medical education arena is full of controversy about methods and their effectiveness. I wonder if there are any specific studies that really looked into evaluation of the mind mapping in comparison with other methods, just to show its effectiveness. Thank you very much.
Yes, this is a very good comment. As we said, we want to go away from the Superman approach to collaboration approach, and everyone needs to be involved. Now, we are planning to follow up with detailed modeling, dynamic and complex modeling to simulate and get results. But the key message is when you define success or failure, it's based on the purpose. You either fail or success to achieve a goal or a purpose. And the highlight is when you use ideology, you are deviating from the need of the society. This is very important. You don't need to make a detailed measurement for any statistics to know that. If you are using ideology, you are serving ideology, you're not serving the country, and that's what we would like to highlight here. I agree with you. We are going to do a follow-up and more detailed analysis and modeling, because it's complex and dynamic. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Tony Buzan, the inventor of mind mapping, is doing now a lot of courses around the world, here also in UK. I have the privilege to be trained by Tony Buzan. and we are TLI, Think Boza licensed instructor. We have the authority to train others, and he can train other people also. And there are website and online courses of mind mapping by Tony Buzan himself. Regarding the researches, yeah, there are many researches compared between text or linear methods and mind mapping. I mentioned some of these researches on my presentation, and because we are limited for only 15 minutes, there are a lot of comparison researches between mind mapping and other text slides.
Hello, I'm Chooks. I'm from Peru, University of Sussex here. I was just going to add that some of the points have been covered, but thank you for very good presentations. One of the things I noticed from the work, although they're situated in Sudan context, there's a lot of learning that can take place and a lot of extension of the incredible work you've done and the result from the presentation across Africa, for example. So how does that reflect in the work you're doing? I'm presenting on Nigeria, so it's not any, but I think part of the knowledge, learning, and innovation we expect as well that will be taking place or could be happening is that we can as well learn from each other, because from the education, what is happening, I'm thinking of other places I know. I work in South Africa, the education is big. Knowledge, building the capabilities. The mind mapping is the same. How do we work in a way that we can as well learn from each other and share some of this knowledge and the lesson? Again, that goes into dissemination of engagement and dissemination of the incredible work you've done. So I think that is very good. On another level, I was wondering what happens to grassroots people in education. What are their interaction? What is the level of input? What is the result? So looking at the policy impacts from the work, how we can share that, how we can learn across the continent as well is very important, even though the empirical evidence may come from one place, but there are lessons and knowledge that can be shared. So I would like to follow up with you more on that to see how these exchanges can take place. So thank you for very brilliant presentations. Thank you.
Well, the last question, please.
Daba Chaudhuri, Director of Middle East Research Center in Suffolk University in UK. And I just give you a little feedback about the KPI. That's the first presenter. I think is really interesting topics for Sudanese young generation, for young people who may need to be actually enter the education world or in the global market. So once you're actually talking the KPI, I'm sure that one of our colleagues already asked you the question, how are you measuring this thing? I think you should probably get some stakeholder feedback and get your own target and then compare in the gap, so you can may actually see the real KPI. And also you may talk about some the model you are talking. I'm not sure how much you actually justify from the hypothetically. I don't know whether you have a hypothesis to prove it, so you may use some hypothesis, therefore it will be actually give the more clear definition how you actually justify the model. So that will be the actually first something I want to say from first one. And the second from the mind mapping, actually it was big interest for me, and thank you very much for your presentation. I'm teaching this actually innovation creativity last four and a half years, and I used to teach brain theory in University of Plymouth. So I want to actually ask you, like think about last 100 years, you're talking about little bit color. I mean, I know you talk in the color and left hemisphere and right hemisphere. Do you not believing that like current situation and the current environment, actually we are damaging because of color? Do you believe that thing? This is my question, because if you look at like 100, 200 years, the all innovation like a light, rail, telephone, everything actually come from non-color. If you look at the theory of brain. Now, if you want to using mind mapping, do you think it will be actually good for young people, or as you are going to introduce the student, is it a good things to introduce in that early age or later stage? That is my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. if I got your point, okay. I think nature is colored. Okay, so even before 200 years or more, nature is colored. So we are in color since we are created here in our world. So for both, from the researches, for both, for the children and for the adults, okay, I think mind mapping will be effective in teaching. Because as I mentioned before, when we teach without color, without the visual imaging, I think we only stop one half of our brain. So anatomically, I think when we teach by this way, it can be effective for many, for every level, I think. I got your point? No? Or not? So you can make.
No, I mean actually the color in terms of innovation, I think the creativity not should be only for color.
No. Mind mapping, as I mentioned before, it is a whole brain. We are not neglect the left side of our brain. But usually when we teach, we use only logic and analysis and something like this. But mind mapping, we used our whole brain. It is radiating for right and left sides. So it doesn't mean that we have to concentrate only on colors. No, we have to mix both right and left sides of our brain.
Yeah, just one comment about the KPIs. If you are heading to go to London and you take a train to Portsmouth, you will never get to London. And this is about the direction. So in the first stage, what is the education system was aiming is to serve the national plan, the country. When we have the two uphills in 1969, 1989, it changed the purpose. So instead of heading to London, it's heading to somewhere else. And that's why it can't be right. You don't need a detailed KPI to tell that. This is key. Okay?